You're listening to Sirius XM Insight. And this is Tell Me Everything with John Fugelsang.
Representative Pabon, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on Sirius XM Insight.
John, thanks for having me.
We're so honored to have you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for joining us. How did this resolution come about?
You know, I think this is a resolution that we discuss regularly amongst ourselves when we talk about criminal justice issues and what we want to focus on from the Hispanic Caucus perspective. And, you know, given the statistics about the number of minority and people of color who are on death row right now, we realize that this is just the civil rights issue of our time, and we want to focus on the justice aspect of our criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm. Well, I couldn't agree more. Did you encounter a lot of local opposition? I mean, you know, we always have this discussion about Latino American ideology as if it's one monolithic mass, and in reality, we know that there is tremendous conservatism and tremendous progressivism within the Latino community. But when it comes to an issue like the death penalty, to me, I think when you start factoring Catholicism into it, the teachings of every pope and the teachings of Christ itself, there might be more unity. Did you encounter any resistance among your fellow Latino legislators?
Not really at all. And I think this cuts above any particular ethnicity, nationality, and frankly, religion, because I think there's basis for repealing the death penalty no matter what you believe or whom you believe in. And it's almost a universal truth that, you know, we should repeal what essentially is a barbaric practice that most civilized countries in the world have repealed, and we need to update our laws to reflect our more reasoned and enlightened approach.
I couldn't applaud you more, Representative. I mean, the death penalty is morally wrong. It goes against everything the New Testament is about, and of course, as we know, it's disproportionately applied to people of color. What has the history of the death penalty been in your state of Colorado?
Well, I'll tell you right now, we have three men who are on death row. They are all African American. The latest case that we had that applied the death penalty was the James Holmes case, very, very well-known Aurora shooting case. And James Holmes, as you well know, is Caucasian. And the jury decided not to apply the death penalty to James Holmes. And so, again, looking at the racial dynamics of our state, it's clear that there is a civil rights issue here, and it only makes it that much more important to work on that issue in this state as well as every other state that still has the death penalty on the books.
I got to be honest, a part of me wondered if James Holmes would have had his sentence commuted, as it were, and been spared the death penalty, were he not Caucasian. It's fair to say that in many parts of the country, we could assume that he would get the death penalty.
Well, if you look at recent history, that is the case, that minority, Latino, and African American, Native American, Asian Americans are punished more harshly than their Caucasian counterparts. And, you know, the fact of the matter is the death penalty is a final sentence, and we need to recognize that may just have that it has a disproportional effect on our communities of color.
I'd like to open this up to our listeners. Do you have views on the death penalty that might be controversial? Are you Hispanic and opposed to it? Are you Hispanic and for it? Do you still believe the death penalty is actually a deterrent to crime? Give us a call here at Sirius XM Insight at 877-974-7487. That is 877-9-SIRIUS. Now, Representative Pabon, I was being a bit rhetorical because we already know, and this is not opinion, this is fact, it costs a lot more money to put someone to death than to keep them in prison for life. And we also know about the ineffectiveness of capital punishment in reducing crimes. Nobody has ever stood on the corner, hopped up on meth, and said, I want to rob this liquor store, but that death penalty might get in the way. Do you think that more and more people are waking up to realize that the death penalty has just been inefficient and unsuccessful?
I think so, and the evidence I have of that is a very conservative state like Nebraska that is primarily Republican-controlled and a conservative state recently decided to repeal the death penalty because of the cost issues. And so I think, again, no matter what background you come from or political view you have, religious belief or ideology, there is a way to make the clear conclusion that the death penalty, just no longer has a place in our books and will likely be a mark against us in our history. But that doesn't, mean we shouldn't continue to work to remedy that.
Yes, sir. In your conferences about this resolution, what did you, sir, learn about evidence of anti-Latino bias in terms of the application of the death penalty?
Well, it's a state-by-state issue, but the national statistics are pretty clear that there is a bias against defendants who come from a racial or ethnic background that's not white. And so, our discussions were pretty robust in the fact that it is our constituents, frankly, who are facing these severe penalties. And of course, the cases themselves, depending on what state you go to, are not very rare. And unlike Colorado, that only has 3 death penalty inmates, Texas, which has a large Hispanic population, is tremendous, as well as other states that simply keep this penalty on the books. We want to change that.
And God bless you for it. We have a few listeners who'd like to weigh in. Would you mind that, Representative?
Sure.
Okay, great. Joe is calling from Maryland. Joe, welcome. You are on Sirius XM Insight with State Rep Dan Pabon.
Thank you, Dan, for doing the Lord's work, and I'm an agnostic.
Well, you know what? Some of the best Christians I know are atheists, so I'm glad to hear it.
2 quick points. One, I told your caller, but I wanted to add to what you said about Nebraska. The only time I was able to turn a conservative friend to my point of view was abolition of the death penalty, when I made a conservative argument that if you are against giving the state too much power, why would you then give the state the power to kill you?
Right? I mean, exactly. I love that you said that, because to me, Representative, when you're talking about the state having the power to take a guy who might be innocent, strap him to a table, pump him full of poison the taxpayers had to pay for, and stand there until he's dead, it doesn't get more big government than that.
And you can make that personal to the person with whom you're arguing by saying you are giving the state the power to kill you.
Yep.
Not some abstract person on death row. The other point I wanted to make was, is it about race, or is it really about class? And the high numbers of people of color being executed is really a reflection on the way income is distributed in this country. And I came to that when O.J. got away with murder, and allegedly. Mm-hmm. And I argued to my friends, I'll say, I will support the death penalty when they execute a rich person.
Yeah, great point. Representative?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think the statistics play that out, that many of these defendants are in fact defended by a public defender that is, again, taxpayer paid, which adds to the cost of the application of the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
And you're only eligible for a public defender, at least in Colorado, and I'm pretty sure nationwide, if you have a certain income threshold. And so I think that speaks for itself, that the poor are being disproportionately executed because they can't afford the high-priced lawyers that other defendants can.
It's it's very well put. And you know what? The OJ case, and again, I'm among those who feel that OJ's defense team did a good job of breaking the prosecution's timeline. I felt him to be unconvictable, but if he was not a millionaire and did not have that kind of legal defense, I think we all know how that case would have wound up.
Yeah, I think he would have been dead by now.
No, they would have kept him on
Or-
death row
or
for.
at least
He would have been on death row
he'd
for 20.
probably be in jail by now. He'd be in jail by now.
Well, you're very right about that. Thank you so very much for the call. And it is worth pointing out again, Representative, that it does cost more to execute a person than to keep them in jail for life. So,
And as we look at the taxpayer dollar and how precious those are these days, again, either from a conservative or a liberal point of view, it's just not a good use of our expenditures. And we should be focusing on prevention, proactive education in the community, and all those things. And we spend nearly triple that trying to defend these cases down the road.
Amazing. Mary is calling from Atlanta. Mary, welcome. You are on Sirius XM Insight with Representative Dan Pabon of Colorado.
Hey, a few years ago I read that Justice Blackmun, the more cases he heard, the more he had decided that this was cruel and unusual punishment, mainly due to the arbitrariness of how it's applied.
That's exactly correct. In fact, when he left the Supreme Court, he said he would no longer be a part of the machinery of death.
That was all.
Absolutely. It's a great point. Thank you very much, Mary, for calling about that. I do appreciate it. I mean, do you find that's the case, Representative, that very often folks who are opposed to the death penalty generally are people who in their younger days, before they thought about it too much, thought, yeah, it's a great idea, fry the bad guys?
Yeah, I think it's like anything else in your journey through this issue. Early on, it's easy to come to simple conclusions. Literally, things can seem black and white, no pun intended. But in this case, I think we see that, like many other statistics in the justice system, that there is a disproportionate amount of defendants who are, from minority communities. And in that case, and you're in a position to apply the death penalty, you're going to have a very unjust result. And again, why we're, as a National Hispanic Caucus, focused on getting justice in the justice system.
And if you're just tuning in, our guest is Representative Dan Pabon of Colorado, and the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators just announced that they passed a resolution calling for the end of the death penalty in the U.S. Representative Pabon, you said this is the civil rights issue of our time. Even if repealing the death penalty results in one innocent life being saved, it's worth it. Our criminal justice system should focus on justice. Those are beautiful words, and I applaud you. But what I think I admire the most about this is that you and your fellow legislators are taking the position that you're also against the death penalty for guilty people. And I'm wondering, did the faith of yourself and the faith of any of your fellow legislators play a role in arriving at this decision?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I think, again, as you spoke to earlier, our caucus comes from many different faiths and many different backgrounds. So I can't, point to one particular faith. But, I think for me personally, the what it comes down to is both faith-based as well as just general morality-based, that we certainly can punish, and when it's not a deterrent. And we also have statistics that say that rehabilitation services are far better for our system and show much better results than a life sentence. But even if those rehabilitation options aren't available, and it's the choice between a death penalty and a life sentence, we would err on the side of a life sentence just because of the preciousness of life and what it means for the state, again, to impose the ultimate penalty, which, again, by the way, has been outlawed in almost every civilized country in the world.
Amen. I mean, I think pro-lifers who support the death penalty are like vegetarians who eat meat. Now, I did know that since 1973, more than 150 innocent people have been exonerated and released from death row. For the past couple of years, I've hosted the Death Penalty Focus of Southern California Awards Dinner, and I've had the privilege of meeting many exonerees, some of whom we've had on the show who spent decades on death row before being cleared by DNA evidence. One stat that I didn't know before your report came out was that of the top 10 counties that most actively seek the death sentence, all of them have large or majority Latino populations.
It's striking, and it's unfortunately not very surprising to those of us who represent these counties. We just know that there's a harsh and disproportional bias against communities of color, and we want to combat that with taking a strong stance in favor of repealing the death penalty.
What is your hope now, Representative? Do you hope that other states will take a page out of your book, and that possibly the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators will have more influence, and that this will just spread state to state?
Well, I think one of the calls to action that we all have is to look at our own individual states, and in my case, Colorado. I will look to, introduce a bill that repeals the death penalty in Colorado if one of my colleagues already hasn't taken on that issue. So regardless, I think you'll see that bill in the Colorado legislature, and I hope you'll see it in as many other legislators' agendas as we can find going forward. And this is like a ripple effect in a large way. We are starting the wave, and we hope that it spreads to every corner of the country.
Representative Dan Pabon serves the 4th District that's Denver, in Colorado, and he is here talking about the Hispanic legislators' call for the repeal of the death penalty. Sir, what an honor to have you join us. Thank you so much for your service.
John, thanks again for your time.